Hey, it's time for TV Skywriter.
Good evening, morning, or afternoon, wherever you are, and welcome to TV Skywriter. I'm Pat Murray. I publish the Durham Skywriter, the Durham, North Carolina's online community paper. And with TV Skywriter, I introduce you to people I think you should know. Half of my guests are local, and just so happens that today's guest is local. Welcome, Susan Martin. She's a volunteer with Dementia Inclusive Durham. Welcome, Susan.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Happy to have you here. Now, Dementia Inclusive Durham is something that's new to me. When you told me about it, I was so excited because I actually did move here to Durham to take care of my aunt, who had Alzheimer's. So tell us, please, what is Dementia Inclusive Durham?
Dementia Inclusive Durham, it started several years ago. We're a grassroots initiative coalition of volunteers from all different sectors. We have faith-based communities, neighborhoods, organizations, and our sole purpose is to increase the understanding and awareness of dementia to enhance the well-being of folks living with dementia in Durham and their care partners. So our goal is to make Durham a dementia inclusive community.
Nice. Now I'm wondering how it came about, because I know we have the Durham Center for Senior Life, and we have the Partnership for Seniors. So how did this start?
This came out of an initiative several years ago to look at reducing the incidence of abuse within long-term care facilities. And so a group got together and started looking at ways to work with folks with dementia within the community to allow them to remain home for as long as possible. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned Durham Center for Senior Life. They are part of our group. They have volunteers that join us, and we work closely with them. Department of Senior Services. So basically everybody started looking at the number of folks living in Durham that have dementia, and what can we do to improve their well-being, to enhance their well-being, to be able to stay at home, provide support and education for caregivers. So I've only been involved with the group for about a year, so the early start, I'm not all that familiar with the ins and outs and the real specifics, but it's been around for several years and they have lots of great support.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. Now we're throwing around this word dementia like everybody knows what it is. So I'm going to ask you to tell us what dementia means. Now, a lot of people think it's the same as Alzheimer's, and it's not necessarily, but I'll let you define it for me.
Dementia is a umbrella term or a general term to describe a set of symptoms that people have. They include memory loss, confusion, language finding abilities, executive function, impairment. So it's a global term, it's a blanket term to describe changes in various different thinking abilities. And dementia is not the same as Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's disease is one of the diseases or the causes of dementia, but dementia can also be caused by, there's vascular dementia. Alzheimer's is the number one cause. Alzheimer's disease is the number one cause of dementia. Then vascular dementia is the second leading form of dementia, which is caused by strokes, cardiovascular accidents, that type thing. But there's a lot of other diseases and conditions out there that could cause dementia, a traumatic brain injury, different diseases like multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, Lewy bodies. So there's various forms of dementia that are caused by different diseases or conditions. So dementia, it just describes the symptoms that people exhibit.
Okay. And again, I mentioned that my aunt had Alzheimer's. I think she came by it, but I would say naturally, if that's the correct term. I mean, he had no injuries or strokes or anything. My father, on the other hand, had a stroke. Actually, he had a car accident.
Okay.
bashed his head against the windshield, had a stroke, and then it descended into dementia, which descended into Alzheimer's. And I think that might be sort of common for some other folks as well.
Yeah, people that have dementia, as I said, dementia can be caused by a variety of conditions, things that have happened. A car accident, somebody that has a traumatic brain injury or repeated concussions, that can lead to dementia, because dementia is caused by death or disease to the brain cells, which cut down, which decrease their ability to communicate with each other. Sometimes parts of the brain start to die, deteriorate. So it's the death of the brain cells which lead to the changes in all these different thinking abilities. And depending upon the part of the brain that is affected, that's going to lead to the different changes that you see. Somebody who has memory loss, somebody who can no longer find the appropriate words to use, people who lose track of time, they show poor judgment. So depending upon the part of the brain that is affected will lead to changes in various thinking abilities.
Right. That's why I was comparing my aunt's situation with my dad. My aunt, it was a slow descent. With my dad, it was, as my mom used to take notes for the doctor's visits. And I remember her words exactly, alarming memory loss.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason I'm bringing all of this up is because I'm very happy to know that there's going to be a 3-part community forum for the West End.
Correct.
And people who are sort of dealing with these issues will get to attend these 3 free events
Mm-hmm.
and learn an awful lot. So why don't you tell us about the first one, which is next week, right? July 28th?
It is correct. It's July 28th. It's going to be held at the Lion Park Community Center. And we will have Dr. Mitch Heflin and Dr. Goldie Bird. They are 2 guest speakers, and they are going to be talking about dementia, what it is, what the causes of dementia, some of the behavioral characteristics, and then also talk about some of the risk factors, some of the modifiable risk factors. And then we're also going to do some small group work where we want folks to sit down and really start talking about things that they have in place within their community to make it dementia inclusive. So I think people do a lot of things already to really include those with dementia, but most importantly, their care partners. Most of the time, care for those with dementia are their family members, and it's draining, it's exhausting. There's a lot of social isolation, I apologize, and just trying to find help to keep the family afloat and to help their loved one the best. It's overwhelming. They don't know where to turn, how to turn, and there's still the stigma attached to having dementia or having Alzheimer's. It's a frightening diagnosis, and it's frightening for family members, but also for neighbors and loved ones. How do I interact with this person? Are they going to be the same? How can I keep them engaged to live the best life possible?
Right.
And then the second event we're going to do in August, it's going to be a much smaller focus group for folks that are living with dementia and their care partners. It's going to be a much smaller focus on one-on-one tips and techniques on what to do. And then our final event will be September 22nd, and that's when we're going to host a large resource fair where we're inviting agencies and organizations who provide services to support persons living with dementia and their care partners. We're going to have information available about the importance of personalized music. So we're going to have a wide variety of folks and individuals there at the resource fair. And they're all free events.
Wonderful. So this first one is going to be Saturday.
Correct.
July 28th. It's going to be at Lion Park. I guess the formal name is the Community Family Life and Recreation Center.
Correct.
Lion Park. But we all Lion Park Rec Center. 1309 Halley Street.
Correct.
And it's in the morning, right? 9 until noon?
From 9 until noon, yes.
Okay.
And we've been very fortunate. We've had all of the events we're doing, they're all free because we've been very fortunate, and we received a neighborhood matching grant for health through the city of Durham. We also have a couple other additional partners who have joined us. We have the West End Community Center Advisory Committee, the Community Health Improvement Partnership, funding through the Emmy Lou Tompkins Foundation. So we have a lot of really great support from the community who are helping us put on our events. So it's free of charge.
I love it. And if I'm not mistaken, breakfast will be served as well.
Yes, yes, breakfast will be served, yes. And then the August event, as I said, that's also 9 to noon, but that'll be a smaller focused event. But then the September event will be wide open, and we have yet to set the exact time, but I'm pretty sure it'll be 9 till noon. But as I said, we haven't locked in that time yet.
Okay, let's talk about dementia just a little bit in terms of factors, the details, because I'll bet now again these events are for people primarily in the West End community, right? So there might be people watching this show or people who see a flyer and they might not be sure if this pertains to them. Maybe they're not exactly sure what the symptoms are. I know some of the symptoms of early dementia, or early stage of dementia, what people call senior moments, but extended senior moments. You shouldn't panic just because you lose your keys. I mean, we all do that.
Right. And we're all going to have times where we can't come up with the right word to use, or we can't remember, or we get lost, or we get turned around. But the symptoms of dementia, they are severe enough that they really impact somebody's ability to function on a day-to-day basis independently. The Alzheimer's Association, alz.org, that's a wonderful resource, online, and they give you the 10 warning signs of dementia. They also will tell you, they have resources. They also have the Alzheimer's store where you can access and get different devices for the home or for the person to help them remain independent. But we all, as you said, as we age, we all experience different changes, but it's the degree of change that is most frightening.
Okay, and you did say
.org, or people can just Google Alzheimer's Association and it'll take you straight to their national website. And it's a wonderful website, and it's very user-friendly.
Now, I'm going to mention something that's very common. This happens all the time with people who have dementia or Alzheimer's, whatever. Again, in the case of, well, some people, including my dad, we go from dementia, unfortunately, to Alzheimer's and downhill from there. But here's something that happens a lot. And I'm mentioning it because sometimes it does end up with either abuse or disagreements or misunderstandings, and that is when the person, let's just say that the patient or the person repeats himself or herself or asks the same thing 5 minutes later or repeatedly. Sometimes it drives people nuts. Sometimes it angers people, and it's like, you're not listening. I just told you, but it's not their fault. And unfortunately, their partner or their neighbor or friend or a family member will think that they're kidding, or they're belittling them, or maybe making fun of them, or trying to be cute. But when it happens over and over, you realize there's something wrong. And like I said, sometimes it does end up with abuse. I've heard this happens a lot, where the person will hit the patient, or slap them, or curse them out, or shout at them. It happens in more than people realize. The first time I encountered it was I was visiting a cousin in New York, and I had no idea what was going on. This was years ago, before I knew anything about Alzheimer's. And I could not figure out why she kept repeating I was getting so frustrated with her. She kept repeating the question over and over, or 5 minutes later to ask the same thing. And it occurred to me years later that she probably had Alzheimer's. And I left her very frustrated. And I was just visiting New York, and I just stopped in for, to say hello. And it occurs to me now that I probably didn't handle it well because I had no idea what I was dealing with.
And what you just shared, Pat, that's such an important component of somebody living with dementia and their care partners or their family or their friends, because as I said, depending upon the part of the brain that is affected, they are going to exhibit these different behaviors, not being able to remember what they said, repeating themselves over and over and over again. They're not doing it on purpose. They cannot remember. That part of the brain is not allowing them to remember. And to be on the receiving end, to 10, 15 times a day have the same question, it's very frightening, and it's very wearing. And that's why we really want to focus on education and building supports for the caregivers so they understand why their loved one is doing this. People that withdraw from conversations, that withdraw from social engagements, it's not because they don't love you anymore. It's not because they don't like you anymore, or they find you boring. But oftentimes when the language skills go, it's hard for them to engage in conversation. And so they start to withdraw and they start to get isolated. So we really want to focus on educating the community as well, and the caregivers on they are doing this because there's a reason, an underlying reason. But also not putting the focus 100% on the disease, because they have the disease. We can't cure the disease. We can't take the disease away, but they are still the same person. They're just different. And how do we engage them in a different way to make them feel that they are still loved, that they can find meaning and joy in their lives?
Yeah. And we do have to admit this. Sometimes they're not the same person. And you just have to deal with it. You just have to accept it. My sister had a hard time accepting some of the changes that my father went through. And I told her, this is the new pop. You just have to.
The packaging is a little different, but the heart and the inside, it's still the same. And it's just trying to get that packaging to be able to, those small moments when you can connect with them, to whatever you do to make sure that their life is enhanced to the very end.
Exactly. And even if they do change drastically, and I'm not trying to push back, but my aunt never did truly accept me. She was a totally different person, and she completely hated me at first. I don't think she knew who I was. Because again, I'm moving from Chicago to North Carolina. I think she lost track of who I was. And it was very, very, very difficult. She never did revert to the person I called my aunt. The person I was dealing with, I was stuck with her. You know, I had to accept that this is how she is now. And speaking about isolation, what often happens if you change drastically, like my aunt did, and my dad, I have to admit, he did not change that much. He just became real forgetful and kind of goofy. But actually, I'm not going to say this about my aunt. I'm just going to say this as a general, because I don't want to put any of her friends down at all, because it's very common for people to step back as well. It hurts to see your friend, how can I put it, in such a bad shape. It happens with the family as well. They will leave you to care for your loved one, and they'll stop helping, and they'll step away as well. And I'm not trying to make this all negative, but this is something that is so common that anyone dealing with dementia or Alzheimer's has to be aware of it. Okay, folks, so I was talking with Susan Martin. She had to go, but here's the thing. We want you to come to this forum if you live in the West End community. This is for you. The organization is Dementia Inclusive Durham, and the forum is the West End Community Forum. The first one is going to be on Saturday. That's July 28th, 9 until noon. You do have to register. Let me just also tell you where it's going to be. Lion Park Rec Center, that is 1309 Halley Street. You do need to register, even though it's a free event. Of course, they want to know how many people are going to show up. So you can call Susan Martin at 314-210-4422. That is 314-210-4422. You can also, if you don't have time to call, you can just send an email real quick to didwestend@gmail.com. My voice was breaking. I'll say that again. didwestend@gmail.com. And this very special three-parter was made possible from a grant from the Durham Neighborhood Matching Grants for Health. That's something that happens every now and then. When it does happen, I like to talk about it, have it on the show. If you get one of these grants, be sure to contact the Durham Skywriter on Twitter @Durham Skywriter. And I think it's all the information that you need. So I'm going to sign off by reminding you to check out the Durham Skywriter, that's Durham, North Carolina's online community paper. You can find it at durhamskywriter.com. I can be reached again on Twitter at Durham Skywriter. And I think that's pretty much it for this show. I want to thank Susan Martin. She is a volunteer with Dementia Inclusive Durham. And if you're like me, a former caregiver, or if you're really, really interested in dementia and Alzheimer's, check their website, Dementia Inclusive Durham, if I'm not mistaken. You know what? I'm going to say Google it. I don't have the URL written down, unfortunately. So I bid you adieu. Have a really wonderful evening. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. And I will see you tomorrow when I do go to the mill. Live on Facebook Live. Find me at Durham Skywriter on Facebook and follow me there as well. So I will see you later. Have a beautiful day. Bye for now.